Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
We are, 2/3 of the way through a Rashi where he's giving a series of not really proof texts, but more places in the Torah where the root ayin resh lamed is used. And he wants us to kind of go with him on the idea that whenever that shoresh is present, it means one and one thing only. And he's going to try to read that as consistently as possible. And it means to be covered up, to be blocked, to be obstructed. So just to get back into it, the verse that we're talking about is verse 12. And if you remember, depending on which version of Rashi you have, there are two comments of Rashi on this verse, but they're sometimes listed in opposite order in your edition of Rashi. So we read first the Rashi comment, which is actually comes second in my volume right here, which is the idea that how could Pharaoh possibly listen to me when the Israelites did not listen to me? And Rashi says this is one of, is it 10? Yeah, 10 Kal v'chomer, a fortiori, a fortiori arguments within the Torah itself, and we looked at that a little bit. I actually want to go back to that for 1 second in a bit. And now we're on the comment of Aral Sfatayim, which we sometimes describe as uncircumcised lips. Was it Everett Fox, I think, who created the adjective foreskinned lips, which is an odd image, but it's actually it's kind of it's very true to what the image is supposed to connote, right? Something that is blocked with a layer that it gets in the way. Let's just call it for what it is. And Rashi kind of took us on a journey of several different places in Torah where that root is used and helping us see that that's what it means there. I did want to go back to the Kal v'chomer thing for one thing, I think. Let me just check. No, we can go forward. It wasn't that significant. Okay. So I don't remember who was reading, but it doesn't remember who was reading because I'll pick a new person. But let's just read the verse as is our wont, just to get going. Chapter 6, verse 12. Vaydaber Moshe lifnei Adonai. Moses spoke in the presence of God, or in front of God, lemor, saying the following. So now we have quotation marks. Hein b'nei Yisrael lo shamu elai. I'm behind the verse, right? No, I'm okay. The Israelites did not heed me. Pharaoh, how would it be then that Pharaoh would heed me, would listen to me? Va'ani aral sfatayim. After all, I am a person whose lips have extra layers. Okay, and we looked at the Onkelos, who translates it as yakir mamlal, heavy of lips, like clumsy. Okay, so we got through the Rashi and the reference to Arela Oznayim in Jeremiah of ears that are covered over with layers that prevent true hearing and understanding. And we got Arle Lev, a heart that is also too obscured or too covered over to understand. And the Hebrew root he keeps using is atum, which means to be sealed, right? Which is evocative, though not etymologically connected to satum, to be closed up. Okay, and then we got to the last one we did was orlat basar, the orla that we are most familiar with, or the circumcision that we're most familiar with, and that is that the member is atum, it is covered over umechuseva, and covered with this extra. That's where we got to. We're now at the verses in Leviticus that he's going to bring. Alan, do you want to read? Va'araltem orlato, and I'll bring up these verses onto the screen as we come to them. It's on the comment Aral Sfatayim on verse 12, about 2/3 of the way through the Rashi. Va'araltem orlato. No? So start reading that, and then we're just going to look at the screen for a second, but why don't you start reading it?
Microphone, please.
Oh, yeah.
Mike, please.
Yeah. Joel, do you want to do your thing where you...
Asulo otam v'kisui amur sheyavdil bifnei achilato.
Okay, let's first look at the verse, right? So if you look at the screen, either on the Zoom or in the room, this is from the 19th chapter of Vayikra. And we got some laws about what's going to happen when the Israelites get to the land of Israel. We made a reference to this last week. Verse 23, V'chi tavo el haaretz. You come to the land. Unnetatem kol eitz ma'achal. And you plant, not nutea, any tree ma'achal. Doesn't mean that the tree is edible. It means tree producing fruits. Ve'oraltem orlato et prio. This is a great example. We've seen this many times where the Hebrew, the verb and the noun are the same thing. You shall oralize its oral, right? So whatever it means, it's built into the construction of the phrase. How is it translated here in the English, the JPS? You shall regard its fruit as forbidden. Meh. Right? JPS is helping us understand what the intention of the verse is, but it's not really helping us understand the words of the verse. But you should, it has an orla because it's orlato, it's orla, and you shall orla it, its fruit, right? It's a hard phrase to make sense of. We'll look at Ever Fox in a second. But we know what the law means. Shalosh shanim yelachem. For 3 years it should be to you arelim. Those trees you should consider to them as being arelim. Lo ye'achel. It shall not be eaten. On that verse, Everett Fox translates it the following way. On that verse it says, now, when you enter the land and plant any kind of tree for eating, I love Everett Fox, you are to regard its fruit, that's the perio. He puts in the word like a foreskin. A foreskin. He repeats it because it's orlatem orlato. You shall regard its fruit a foreskin. For 3 years it is to be considered foreskinned for you. You are not to eat it. Now, someone, before we read the Rashi's treatment of it, how do you make sense of that word, orla, foreskin, vis-a-vis how we're supposed to be considering the fruit of the fruit trees in Israel for the first 3 years? Like, aside from sounding funny, what do you think that means? How is that tree foreskinned? A force field in what way?
Like there's a foreskin around it, so
Good, right? So think of like the Star Wars, you put the shield up and nothing can penetrate it. So normally we think of a foreskin that must be cut away so that the stuff on the inside can be reached positively. Here, it's a defensive foreskin, right? Consider the fruit of a fruit tree in its first 3 years of life in Israel to be impenetrable by you. You're supposed to leave it alone, right? That's 1 second, Barry, and 1 second, Barbara. That's kind of exactly what Rashi says. So now, Alan, again, read Rashi's words. He's giving you his commentary on those words, starting with the words asulo otem. Right where you were reading before. Above that.
Asulo otem. Vikisui.
So pause there. Make for it a what and a what?
Some sort of covering.
Right, like a blockage or a covering, right? And otem is that blockage word we've been using, and kisui, literally just a covering, like a top to a lid is called a kisui, right? But he doesn't mean physically. It doesn't mean that you were supposed to put over it what like my grandfather used to put over his peach trees so that the birds wouldn't get to it. It doesn't mean like a physical covering. Rather, in what way are you going to cover it? As an isur?
Isur sheyavdil bifnei achilato.
Just read those 4 words, translate those 4 words.
Isur, that it would be a prohibition prohibition to eat it, but in this case, yavdil, that divides it. It's a blockage and a prohibition that divides it from being
something close to that. It's a little bit hard Hebrew, or it's actually easy words but hard to figure out the syntax. Yeah. What is the covering, this conceptual covering foreskin of the trees? It is a isur, a force field prohibition that distinguishes it, sheyavdil, right? Bifnei achilato, with respect to its eating. So it might look like the tree next to it. The tree next to it is 5 years old. It has no foreskin anymore. You can eat it. But this tree, looks like every other tree, you conceptually foreskinize it. I'm thinking that someone walking into this room hearing this conversation is like, what the hell is Rabbi Kligfeld teaching? Jesus, Pete. For those of you who are on Zoom, we have one of our pressman leaders walking through the room to gather something, and all she can hear is trees being foreskinned, and we're wondering what she's thinking, okay? It's a conceptual barrier that prevents you, halachically, not physically, from eating it. Ergo, atum. Ergo, foreskin. Ergo, arel. I saw hands. Sue, don't forget what you're going to say. I see Barry, I see Barbara, and then Sue.
Zohar makes a big thing about the foreskin, that it's not kosher. It's not unkosher sex. So it's the same way here, that the fruit is not kosher.
Right, or the fruit is kosher, but it's currently unavailable.
It's in a state of being not kosher.
Correct. Good. Barbara?
Long time ago, I was told that this part of the Torah was preventing we weren't supposed to eat any fruit that came from the tree, because it was helping by not eating the fruit, by not utilizing the fruit, you cutting it off at an early stage, you were allowing the tree to grow better and produce more in the future. It was for growth, which of course we don't worry about in the foreskin for the brie. But actually the most important part of what I wanted to ask was, this says you're not supposed to do it in Israel. Now, would that mean that you shouldn't eat fruit off of a tree in America or France or England?
No.
It's just Israel, right?
Orla is one of those agriculturally based mitzvot that, even according to the most stringent interpretation of halakha, only obtains in the land of Israel, right? There is no obligation for a Jewish farmer in Nebraska to leave the corner of his fields for the poor. Now, a Jewish farmer in Nebraska is obligated to give tzedakah, but is not obligated agriculturally for payah, for those corners, or shechach, stuff left behind. Those only obtain in Israel. A Jewish farmer in Nebraska is not obligated to let his field lie fallow in the 7th year, even if he could, or she could, if she think it'd be better for the field, but there's no religious obligation. It only applies in Israel. Same thing with Orla. If I plant a fruit tree in my yard in Los Angeles, I might have a botanist tell me it's better for the tree to let it grow a bit before you prune it, but I have no religious obligation to hold back from it. Only in the land of Israel. Which is why, Barbara, there are several reasons, and I think we discussed this a few weeks ago, why it's always a curious but tricky game to do what we call tameh mitzvot, trying to figure out the rationale behind the mitzvot. Because on the one hand, we want to know, like, why are we being asked to do this or not do this, right? The problem with coming up with rationales for mitzvot is that if we think the rationale doesn't make sense, or doesn't make sense in this situation, we have an easy opening to convince ourselves why not to do it, right? So some might, like the Rambam, Maimonides would say back to you, you might think, you might be a botanist and an agricultural expert, you might think it's better for the tree to not prune it and to not take its fruit after 3 or 4 years. And I, Maimonides, say back to you, I don't care. This is God telling me to do this. The rationale is that I'm an observant Jew, not that I'm going to have a better field. Might it turn out to be that the field is better? Maybe, but that's not why I'm doing it, right? Because, and then again, and if it was why I was doing it, then maybe I should be doing it even in Nebraska. Now, sometimes we do want to know the underlying rationale for why we're doing something, and sometimes we want to lean into a chok. It's a rule. God said so. Sue, can we give Sue the microphone, or a microphone?
Well, I'm just struggling with why we're. I mean, aside from if we don't ever ask why do these rules apply? I think in our 21st century minds, it's a little bit hard for it to be so random and without explanation in the way I don't know. But aside from that, why are we here talking about the Orla trees? This is all to figure out Orla?
Yes, this is Rashi's 4th or 5th
example of what Orla means.
Right. It's an odd word. It's an odd word whether in Hebrew or in English. And it's a word that has, how do I say this well in English? Where and how it's used are in very, very different contexts, right? So what can be true about a lip? If I asked someone who's not a Torah student, what can be true about a lip, a heart, a penis, and a fruit like it's not easy to come up with an example, right? So Rashi's saying this is what this idiom means in Hebrew in all situations. It doesn't mean something here and something there, and that's why Everett Fox always translates arel as foreskinned, because he's either influenced by Rashi or just agrees with Rashi that it's always the same imagery, even though that wouldn't be our first instinct to think of the tree as having a foreskin. Rashi says, yes, it's just a conceptual one. Barry and then Rosemary?
Doing a parallel application now to Moshe, if the aral fruit is obstructed, it's not kosher. You can't touch it. Moshe's sense of his words is he's not free to make his words. His words are not to be freed yet.
Very good, right? So his statement to God is not just that I don't think I'm good at this, but whatever is inside me that needs to come out is inaccessible because something is blocking it. Good. Rosemary?
Sometimes maybe we use the words to this word is disgusting people, so they won't really touch.
Meaning that will be the impact of Moshe's words upon Pharaoh. He won't go near it. Won't go near it. Interesting. Okay. So so let's pick up on the Rashi. So we got to the Isur she'avdil bifnei achilato, and then he continues. Yep.
Shalosh shanim yeh lachem arelim.
Which is just the continuation of the verse. If you look at the screen or if you look at the screen in front, that this verse mentions the root aral 3 times. In the 2-word phrase, v'aral tem or lato, you should oralize its orla. And then it says, as almost like as an adjective, what shall they be to you? They shall be arelim. So now Rashi renders it adjectively, arelim meaning?
Atum umechuseh umuvdal malacho.
Mi le'echol.
Mi le'echol. Mi le'achlo.
Mi le'achlo, correct.
That it is atum, it is closed and covered and separated from its eating,
from one's eating it is probably the best way to render it, right?
Yeah.
Rashi's adding nothing new here. He's just telling you it means the same thing when it's used as a verb and when it's used as a noun and when it's used as an adjective. So since the verse he brings us in Vayikra has all 3, he just decides to give the modern, contemporary Hebrew versions of that. It's not only an otem, a noun, a covering. It can also mean atum, covered. Questions, comments? Okay. Let's go on to the next verse. I'll stop the share here. Alan, you're just getting started, so why don't you pick up? We're on verse 13.
וידבר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון, ויצווים אל בני ישראל ואל פרעה מלך מצרים, להוציא את בני ישראל מארץ מצרים.
Now, not that you wouldn't anyway, but try to translate these words whose vocabulary is pretty rudimentary, understandable, as precisely as you possibly can.
וידבר, and God said to Moses and to Aaron.
I would choose spoke rather than said.
Okay.
Because the daber is describing the action, not the content.
Okay, and again, remind me that Vidaber is speaking, Ve'omer, one was positive and one was negative.
Well,
we can come back to that.
I mean,
Yeah.
listen, there's no hard and fast rule, but in general, the daber is translated as speak. Lemor is translated as say, such that after a lemor and omer, you have an implied quotation marks, whereas a daber not yet. And yes, midrashically, ledaber is kashut or kashot, harsh words coming from the aspect of Elohim, and omer is rachamim coming from the aspect of yud-heh vav-heh, but not always the case.
Okay, right? So God.
Sometimes a daber is just a daber.
Okay, or a cigar is just as no.
Exactly. Exactly. Speaking of, no, keep going.
Yes. And God spoke to Moses and to Aaron, and from tzivui, command.
Yeah. So if it's from tzivui, what is the subject and what is the object? Because you got a subject and an object built into that word. Vayitzavim.
And God commanded Them, the
Perfectly.
people, yeah.
Good.
God commanded
So
them.
God commanded them, because God is masculine in the Torah, so the Yud is a masculine. God commanded them. So we assume that it means that God commanded whom?
The people.
Moshe and Aaron, right? So the Vayetzavim here is holding the place of what is sometimes a lemor, right? Look at the previous sentence. Vayedaber Moshe lifnei Adonai lemor. Moses spoke to God, saying. Here we have God spoke to Moses and Aaron. And instead of saying, it says, and God commanded them, right? Which means we should assume that what comes next? A quote, right? Because if it was a lemor, it would be the actual content of the speech, right? And I'm bringing this up to make the next translation part intentionally more difficult, okay?
El B'nai Yisrael, to the children of Israel.
So how does that make sense? Make sense syntactically? God spoke to Moses and Aaron and commanded them to the children of Israel. Could be regarding, okay? If anyone who was in shul this past Shabbat morning, our intern Yael Aronoff gave a really wonderful teaching. And at one point in the teaching, we were focusing on, believe it or not, the distinction between El and L. El, Aleph Lama, not L, the English letter L, right? Where in general, L almost always means specifically to, whereas L can mean to or regarding or with respect to. So it's harder, even though I like the instinct, Barry, it's harder to render here Vayetzavem El B'nai Yisrael as, and God commanded them regarding the children of Israel, because it's usually, if you're going to do a regarding, it's a L, not an L. Okay? Keep going, keep translating.
By your own definition, if the first few words is preceding a quote, then the other side of the quote cannot be to. It's got to be something else.
That's why it's a hard verse, right? That's why I'm saying that even though the words themselves are not hard vocabulary words, it's actually a hard verse to make sense of. So God commanded them something about the children of Israel,
And to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel from the land of Egypt.
Remember back in elementary school where you had to do surgery on a sentence to divide between the predicate and the subject?
Diagramming sentences.
Right. It's very hard to diagram the sentence. We kind of know what it means, but it's very hard to diagram it. Moses and Aaron are being spoken to. They are seemingly being commanded, but they're being commanded. The El B'nai Yisrael and El Paro is parallel. So whatever El means in the first phrase, it means in the second phrase. They're commanded regarding let's go with Barry's suggestion, regarding the children of Israel and regarding Pharaoh. But then what does it mean, Lahotziah B'nai Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim? That sounds like a command. It sounds like the actual content of what God wants them to command Pharaoh, bring out the people of Israel from Egypt, right? So we know what it means. What it means is God says, Moses and Aaron, time to get to work. Go tell Pharaoh, let's go. But why the sentence is constructed that way is a little bit interesting. I feel bad that, not feel bad. I wish Larry were here to give us the R.A. Kaplan translation. I'll give you Ever Fox, and then we'll hear from Rick and from Steve. Ever Fox always renders Yud He Vav He as YHWH, so I'll just call it God. God spoke to Moshe and to Aaron and charged them, that's the Vayetzavim, charged them to the children of Israel and to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I don't even know, I'm not even sure exactly what he means by that, right? But he's sort of playing close to what Barry is saying. God spoke to them, the El as about, with respect to those two categories of people. One of them is the children of Israel, one of them is Pharaoh, and then he puts a comma, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. If we wanted to colloquialize this, we might say that God said to Moses and Aaron, you need to somehow work on that stuff between the children of Israel and Pharaoh. And what's the content? Get Pharaoh to get them out of Egypt. But that's not what the words say. Barry and then Sue. Oh, no, I said Rick and Stevie first. Rick and Stevie?
Hi. So my voice is gone, but I hope you can hear me okay.
You're still okay.
Yeah. It's getting better. So when I look at this verse and I see that it's ending this little story and then we're going into something totally different, the genealogy, it's weird that it's kind of a wrap up of what we were just talking about. I looked up to verse 11 again, and there we have Bo Daber El Paro Melech Mitzrayim. It's the same kind of action. Go to Pharaoh and say this, and there it's Vishalach et Bnei Israel. So there's a verb separating Pharaoh and the children of Israel, and here they're kind of mushed together under the Vayetzavim verb, and then you have Lehotzi. But I just wanted to bring that up again, that we've seen this kind of direction before. Go talk to Pharaoh and tell him to let the people go.
Right, but Rick, what you're bringing up complicates our verse, because verse 11, Bo Daber El Paro Melech Mitzrayim, the El very clearly means two.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to render El Bnei Israel in our verse as two, because God's not sending Moses and Aaron to the Israelites right now. God is sending them to Pharaoh regarding the Israelites. So it's harder. But yes.
I'm just saying that the El Paro Melech Mitzrayim is the same in both places.
Yeah.
With the same trope. So
El Paro Melech Mitzrayim, same trope. Correct.
So it echoes in my head. That's all.
I just see, who is the MC on the Zoom screen? I just want to make sure that we know who that person is. MC, can you just tell us who you are? 'Cause I don't recognize that handle. If you could tell us who you are in the chat, or give your full name, or show your face. Stevie?
Yeah, I agree a lot with, was it Everett Fox's translation you just read? Because I would render this as Vayetzavim specifically is right. It's not Lamor, so it's not going to be a direct quote, and that it is to go to the Bnei Israel and to Pharaoh in order to, affect the exodus of the Israelites, and that it's very clunky in English, but I think that the message is like there's a list of instructions. We're not given the list in list form, but within those instructions are going to this group and then going to this group, and the instructions are to cause the exodus to happen. Yeah. And that's right, like it's just very compactly said.
Yeah, I think you're right, Stevie. I put the Everett Fox up on the screen so everyone could look at it, so you could ponder it rather than just hear it. Stevie, not that there's a right or wrong.
He said in regard.
Charge them to the children of Israel, which I understand is like if you charge someone to something and it's not financial, it's like almost putting them on the task of, right? That's how I'm reading his English, but I could be wrong. We could do a Rashi on.
Yeah, I don't think it means in regard to. I think it means like if there were step-by-step instructions, it would be right. This is where it's a change from 2 verses ago. It's like it means first go to Bnei Israel and then go to Pharaoh, and the whole thing is like with the in order to causatively.
So are you saying, Stevie, that you think Everett Fox thinks that the 2 here really means 2, and that God is commanding them, basically dispatching them to the children of Israel first, and then dispatching them to Pharaoh in order to, as you used the word, effect the Exodus?
I think so. Like, at least if L means 2, right? If L is more direct than le, then I think that's how you would have to render it.
Listen, it's a very consistent.
And it's also, right, like, a 2 chapters ago, that was the instruction, right? Also.
Yeah. It's a consistent read. It's not the image that normally comes to my mind when I read this verse. I don't see Moses and Aaron being sent back to the Israelites. I see them being sent to Pharaoh, but it might indeed be what Everett Fox means when he says, charge them to the children of Israel. Like, go to the children of Israel and to Pharaoh, go to Pharaoh. And why are you doing all this? To get them out of Egypt. Barry and then Sue?
I want to put this in the bigger context. Moshe has been charged with this previously. He's been charged to go to the Bnei Israel. He's been charged with go to Pharaoh, and he's failed for the reasons of the lips. Now there's a new start. Aaron's brought in. And so God is charging them both now. Let's start over again. Now, both of you, Aaron's in the picture now. Now, go to the Bnei Israel and go to Pharaoh and commanding, bring the children of Israel out. It's a new story starting now.
Matt, thank you for letting us know that that's what MC stands for. Joanna was here and now she's gone. She had her hand up. All right, we'll come back. Sue and then Barbara.
Well, I'm kind of with Stevie and with Barry on that. I think they're both too, and I think it has to do with them. Moses and Aaron have to go convince the children of Israel that they have to get up and leave. We've talked a lot before about how change is hard no matter what you're going to do, and why would they go follow? Why would they go do this? They have to prep both. But in addition, they have to prep both Pharaoh and the children of Israel. But in addition, if we can read it both as L and that they have to go convince the children of Israel that they're going to get up and leave and they better start preparing for that, it makes more sense what comes next. Now we're going to talk about the children of Israel and who they are and who they're going to go to and who belongs to who. And otherwise it's like, well, why are we talking about all of them?
That's a lovely answer. And what I like so much about it is that it's a totally different read than the read that Rashi is going to give in a few moments as to why we have this genealogy. You, at some point in your comment, said they are both two, which means that the two of them are two. I'm sorry, I just had to do that. You said at one point they're both two, meaning that both of them mean TO, which means what you suggested is that those two are two. Buffalo, sandwich. Okay, sometimes I can't help myself. You all know about the sandwich? Did I tell you about that? About 5 years ago this week, when we were on sabbatical, Noah was studying, by weird coincidence, Noah was a student at Shalhevet. She was a junior in high school, and her English class that semester was British literature. And pre when Zoom was normative, Noah would Zoom into her classes at Shalhevet in real time. So her school day began at 4 p.m. in England. And because she was studying British literature, we had this opportunity to go take her to some of the places she was studying. So when she was studying Shakespeare, we went to Stratford. And when she was studying Jane Austen, we did the Jane Austen tour. And she was reading the Canterbury Tales. So I took her to Canterbury. And on the way to Canterbury, we stopped at Sandwich, the town of Sandwich. In the center of the town of Sandwich, there's a sandwich shop called the Sandwich. We bought a sandwich. And we took a picture of that sandwich in between us. So it was a sandwich. Okay, Barbara.
I think that the sentence could be read, and the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron, and he gave them a command to bring out the children of Israel out of the land of Israel. But then he decided he should let Moses and Aaron know who them were. So he gave them a command, comma, to make to the children of Israel and to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, comma. Mm-hmm. So that's just all that's doing is identifying them.
Yeah.
Because it's the simple. I don't see the sentence as being that hard. He's now giving the command, get those people out of Egypt, but he's just identifying who Moses and Aaron have to talk to.
Yeah,
they have to talk to both.
I think you're correct, Barbara, that the general meaning of the verse is clear, right? Sometimes we have the opposite problem in Torah Hebrew. We know how the sentence is constructed, but we're not sure what it's trying to convey to us because the vocabulary is hard or something like that. This is the verse. We know by the end of verse 13 what we're supposed to be thinking as readers. We're just not exactly sure how every preposition works to get us there.
No, this seems like so simple.
Well, I will send Everett Fox to you for all of his questions.
Just this sentence, I can translate this one.
Stevie.
Yeah, just to add that sometimes you hear about, generals or politicians or whatever, and say like, it'd be easier for me to, stand up to this like powerful person or, to, face an army than it is to, deal with my children, or than it is to deal with like, something that's more human. And from the verse we don't know, but maybe the idea that you're gonna have to stand up to Pharaoh is really scary, and maybe the idea you're gonna have to introduce yourself to the Bnei Israel is really scary. But saying that both of these are requirements is non-trivial.
Great. Every once in a while, I invoke Sal, who used to be in this class, and we used to ask him, how would you film this scene, right? Would you film it as Moshe and Aaron thinking that they had to physically go back to Bnei Israel, reading the El as two, or would you film it that they were just understanding that God is now recharging them on the task of and that would be an interpretation. Okay. Let's jump in the Rashi. The first Rashi is going to pick up on something that Barry was mentioning before, which is the significance of Aaron in the verse. Alan, for a ninth of a second, I forgot your name. You're up.
וידבר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון, לפי שאמר משה, אני ערל שפתיים, צורף לו הקדוש ברוך הוא את אהרון ולהיות לו לפה ולמליץ. Good. And let me give you the nikudot on sereif, because it's tzadi reish pei is one of those words where if it appears in pa'al, it's a different verb than if it appears in pl. It's not just that it's a different form of the verb. So litzrof means to forge something, like an iron forge, but litzaref means to add something, to join something, like lihitz taref is to join. So tseref means to add in or to join. Okay, so now translate. And God said to Moses and to Aaron, because Moshe said that I am of uncircumcised lips, so you will join.
Not you
God,
will.
the God will join. God will join him. Join Aaron to you, Moshe, to be liloto, to be like your mouth, to be able to speak for you, to be your mouthpiece.
Right. So Rashi is sensitive to the same thing that Barry was, which is all of a sudden Aaron's in the verse, and Rashi wants to know, why is Aaron in the verse now? And so Rashi says, Moshe once again showed his vulnerability and his lack of confidence, or maybe even physical ability to do this task. So all of a sudden Aaron gets re-invoked, Seireflo. God added Aaron to the scene, to the command, Lihiyotlo, in order to be lo, for, here's your lamed again, not two. This is a lamed that means for, to be for Moshe as a mouth and as a melitz. What does melitz mean? Interpreter, right? Where do we see melitz in the text of the Torah, not the text of Rashi?
Joseph.
Very good, right? When the Torah says that the brothers were visiting Joseph, and they didn't know that Joseph understood because there was a melitz beinotam. There was an interpreter between them to give the impression that Joseph wouldn't understand their Canaanite language, because the Egyptians didn't know that Joseph necessarily knew that, right? Good. So melitz is to interpret or to communicate. All right. So that's Rashi's answer to the question about why Aaron is present. I see Renee's hand, and I see Stevie's hand.
I just have a question. In my book, it has a reference to something called Lavush Ha'ora. And I don't know what, I was just curious what that.
It's one of the, I think, 17th or 18th century super commentary on Rashi. So sometimes we refer to, but the most traditional super commentaries on Rashi are the Gur Aryeh by the Maharal of Prague, the Mizrahi, who's earlier than that, and Lavush Ha'ora. I have on my shelf a volume of that where it's like it does to Rashi what a standard Mikro Gdolos does to the text, where it has a line of Torah, a line of Rashi, and then 5 commentaries on each line of Rashi, and that's one of them. I forgot exactly where Lavush Ha'ora was written. Yeah.
Thank you.
Stevie.
Yeah, just this verse is the final verse in the weekday Torah reading, in the first Aliyah. And because of that, I feel like I've always sort of made the same assumption that Rashi seems to be making here, that this is the concluding of the the back and forth that we just had. So therefore it's like, oh, Moses was complaining that he doesn't speak well, and God just throws another character into the mix to solve that. But I like looking at it sort of without that bias. I think maybe it is introducing what's going to come next, but I've always just sort of assumed that it is a conclusion to what comes before also.
Yeah, and it's another interesting example of where our division of text is different than the classic secular or Christian division of text, because we have an end of an aliyah there. If you look in the text of the Torah, there's a parsha stuma there, right? So there's a closed break. So you would actually see some space.
But there's one before the verse also, on both sides of the verse.
Right, correct. That's a good point. So there's a petucha before the verse, so the line is clear all the way to the end of the column, end of the row, and then there's another one after this. So this verse kind of stands almost on its own. But the Christian division of chapters has this going right into verse 14, which is the beginning of this genealogy, and the chapter doesn't end until the end of verse 30 with another line that also seems like, well, it's interesting. When we get there, you'll see there's a argument through the generations of whether or not verse 28, verse 29, or verse 30 of our chapter is an ending. But there are different ways of like where you put a comma and where you put a period in a sentence and in a paragraph makes a big difference. Rick?
Yeah, hi. I was just going to bring that up, Rabbi. I was looking at the Silverman commentary and it mentioned verse 29 and 30. So I looked at it, and it's the same. It's like echoes of the same conversation. In 30, we have Aral Sfatayim again, and they're not going to listen to me again. So, spoiler alert, we're going to see it again in 29 and 30, the same. Go talk to Pharaoh and do this.
Well, but by the time we get there, it'll be so far in the future, it'll be like 2024. So we'll have forgotten we had the conversation.
So my question is, why did somebody throw the genealogy in between these two parts? I mean,
yeah.
Steve, you said that one ended the Aliyah, and then where we are 29 and 30, that's the beginning of Shlishi, and there's an ending there. There's a patuach. There's a.
Well, Rashi will have his own answer to that question, which we'll get to either in the next 11 minutes or next week.
I didn't read that.
Before I forget, in case someone has to leave early, I'll send an email out as I always do. We'll have class next week as normal. And then there'll be 3 Wednesdays in a row where I'm out of town and will not be able to teach. I'll discuss with Leonard which of any of those he will be doing. But if it's happening, it's only Zoom because we're not meeting in person if I'm not here. So next week, which is the 8th, today the December 1st, today's the 30th. So the 7th as normal. And then whether we're going to have class on the 14th, 21st, or 28th will come out in an email. Barry?
So I'm going to do a deep dive here. If Moshe is Aral, this is God imposed. Moshe doesn't know that. So the story is that Moshe is not meant to be the spokesperson and not to be the intermediary of the Bnei Israel to God. He's only has one task, and bring the people out. So Aaron is now brought in ultimately to become the high priest, the one who intercedes between the Bnei Israel and God, and to do those things. And so this is the beginning of that. And so now bringing in the genealogy, this is Aaron's connection between the Bnei Israel and God. This begins his story.
So let's hold that as a possibility. We have one more Rashi to get through before we even get to the genealogy. Let's see how long it takes. Alan, I'll take you off the hook because you've been on for a while. Carol, do you want to read the Vayetzavim el Bnei Israel?
Vayetzavim el Bnei Israel, Tsum Alehem Lehinahagim.
Close. Let me first correct the nikud on the first one. It's not tsum like fast, but tzivam, commanded them. Tziva otam. Lehanhigam, lahanhig otam.
Okay, Lahani. Benachat ulisvol otam. Okay,
This is going to be one of those situations where once we translate Rashi, we'll have an answer, and then we're going to have to figure out what was Rashi's question, because Rashi's question is hard to discern here. Let's first figure out his answer.
Okay, so well, this is the he commanded them to them. So there's a lot of names there.
Yeah, it is. The alehem here is probably best rendered in English as regarding them or for them, which I believe is Rashi's way of telling you what he thinks that el means here. Remember we said that el is different than le? And Rashi saying, read this el, aleph lamed, less as a to, but more as if it were an al. Like, the great pun of the Israeli national airline, El Al, like it sounds good. And it's El Al means two up, right? El Aliyah. It's really, but it's also making use of biblical short words that are not quite interchangeable, but are in relationship with each other. So Rashi says, read this El as an Al. And Alehem means on them, upon them, regarding them. Okay,
so command regarding them, that's sort of to lead them, lahin.
Correct. To lahanhig otam is the he feel of noheg. A manhig is a leader. Yeah, so to lead them in what way?
I don't know what a nachat is.
What is nachas?
Calmly.
Gentleness, right? Not in Yiddish Hebrew, nachas is pride, but nachat, like nachat ruach, is a tender gentleness, right?
Oh, so lead them gently and with savlanut, right? To be patient with them.
Right, to tolerate them. We've talked before how lisbol in Hebrew brings up both sides of how the word tolerate is used in English, and suffer, right? Like normally we think of them as different words, but they're really to tolerate something is to suffer something that you wish you didn't have to tolerate. And in Hebrew, it's the same root. Lisbolotan means endure them somehow, right? So that's his answer. We don't know what he's troubled by in the verse, but Rashi says, what does the phrase mean that God commanded them, to or regarding children of Israel? It means God said to Moses and Aaron, in your manhigut of them, in your leadership of them, do it nicely. If they complain, tolerate them. So now I ask you, Carol, anyone, what? Like, again, I know what Rashi's saying, but why is that interpretation of this verse? Or what was Rashi's problem on the verse such that this is a plausible answer? Rosemary, let's give her the microphone, and then Alan.
I'm just happy to see the gently word here, because since the beginning, it's just bugging me, because we always criticize Israel to be complaining all the time. And even at the beginning of this chapter, when we were reading, God even complains that I'm talking to them, they don't listen. And it brings me an experience that I had, and I know many people from those countries have. When I went to France the first time, I heard the word democracy, and everybody thought it was very easy, but it took me 15 years to learn what is the word democracy, how to apply it. So it's not that we give people freedom, they become free. And I think that's also the mistake that our government does. They go in a country, they say everybody should be Democrat, and they will become. It takes really time. I have stories which is funny, how I learned how to even speak, because before we wanted to speak, our heart was beating, and everything was very hard, because from childhood, your parents hit you, say, shut up, the government does, the teacher does. So these people were living, even if in miserable condition, at least they had a house, they were eating, and they were badly treated, but that was their destiny. They accepted. And suddenly God comes, says, okay, you are going to go out. I heard you. I mean, who is God for them? We know who is he, but they didn't know. And Moses said, let's go out. Where are you taking us? So why do we complain over saying Israel was complaining? They need time to learn. So gently give them time to learn.
And your comments, Rosemary, are also sort of an answer to my question on the question, which is what's troubling Rashi about the verse? Rashi is saying, why is God going back to mention the Israelites when what's really happening next is Moses and Aaron going to Pharaoh, and God says, and Rashi says that God says, you, Moshe, cannot stop critiquing these people. You even use them as a reference. Hey, they won't listen to me. How can Pharaoh listen to me? So the first thing I'm telling you is treat these people with more nachat, right? So God said, it's as if Rashi is saying, God said to Moses and Aaron regarding the children of Israel, what did he say regarding them? They're your people, and be patient with them, right? And then we'll get to the content of getting them out of the land of Egypt. But first and foremost, you're not going to take them anywhere if you're not patient with them. Wonderful. Alan, and then Marshall, and then we're probably going to be out of time.
It was that same thought about going back to what was taking place, that the children of Israel are already suffering additional hard work. If you're going to try and lead them out, you've got to make sure you're going to have patience and have Rahmanas on them to be able to accomplish that.
Correct. Very nice. Marshall, potentially the last word, and then and then don't go anywhere because I want to show you all something. But go ahead, Marshall.
Well, I think back to verse 9, which described the people as mikotze ruach me'avodah kasha. And here, in contrast, Moses, who probably was very frustrated with the people, he has to be reminded, look where they are, and you have to be able to deal with them, not with such harshness either, as Pharaoh was dealing with them.
Good. And you, Moses, think you're vulnerable, therefore you want more attention and nachat from me. How about you be a repository of nachat for the people that I'm asking you to lead? All right, everybody, have a good day.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.